In October of 1836, 35% of the workforce in the Lowell textile mills turned out to strike, the second in 2 years, against wage cuts, long work hours, rent increases, and what Lowell's mill girls termed industrial slavery. Though the strikers' demands were not met, the 1836 strike demonstrated the further formation of class consciousness and action among the industrial working class in the U.S. These attitudes and actions would continue to blossom throughout the 19th century. This essay will seek to answer such questions as: who participated in the 1836 strike at the Lowell mills? What was the relationship between job, wage, nativity, and the decision to strike? And what forms of labor consciousness can be derived from the 1836 Hamilton payroll data? The conclusions reached as a result of statistical primary and historiographical analysis are that those who went on strike in 1836 were largely native-born, skilled, mid-pay level workers with 3 years or more experience and overwhelming literacy rates, which allowed for sophisticated articulation of working-class discontent. For the purposes of this essay, the labor and strike dynamics of the 1836 Lowell textile mill strike will be analyzed mainly through the 1836 payroll data of the Hamilton Mill, compiled by Dr. Thomas Dublin. Chi-square and ANOVA significance will be given with tabular information, demonstrating the statistical significance of this essay's findings. In addition to providing raw data, the 1836 Hamilton payroll will also aid in directing historical inquiry into qualitative primary data, such as the Lowell offering and secondary historical literature dealing with the Lowell mill girls. The Lowell mill girls have captured the attention of historians across the ideological and academic spectrum. Interest in these young female workers stems from scholarly curiosity concerning the cultural and economic shifts within the United States during its transition from an agricultural to an industrial society. These young women were among the first of the industrial working class in the America. Growing up on their families' New England farms, they learned to value biblical wisdom, the Protestant work ethic, and Victorian gentility. Answering the call of Lowell textile mill owners, who sought a stable source of factory labor, these young women migrated to Lowell, often staying at company boarding houses. The mill girls' responses to the new industrial order in New England would ultimately lay the foundation for industrial labor militancy in the United States and draw the attention of 20th century historians, who sought to challenge the thesis of America's exceptional immunity to socialism. The first histories of the mill girls were their own published memoirs. Works, such as Harriet H. Robinson's Loom and Spindle, 1898, describe her experiences living in Lowell and working in the mills. The reader is also exposed to Robinson's observations concerning industrial classes and female independence. This largely forgotten text enjoyed renewed interest as labor historians of the late 1970s and 1980s, motivated by Marxian historical analysis, sought to trace the genealogy of the industrial working class, proletarian subculture, and labor relations within U.S. history. The writings of the highly literate mill girls, as well as the payroll data of the Lowell textile mills, provided source material for historians. Excerpts from the Lowell Offering, the literary magazine produced by the mill girls from 1850 to 45, were published in monograph form in 1977 by Benita Eisler. Substantive qualitative analysis was done by Marxist labor historian Philip Foner in The Factory Girls, 1977, an edited collection with in-depth historical commentary of poetry, literature, and correspondence of the Lowell factory girls, demonstrates their working-class consciousness, intelligence, and creativity. Thomas Dublin's Women at Work, The Transformation of Work and Community in Lowell, Massachusetts, 1826 to 1860, 1979, provides largely quantitative analysis of women's interaction with their working and living environments via utilization of payroll data to flesh out the details of workers' living arrangements, national origins, literacy, salary, working assignments, and shifting labor demographics. Dublin references his use of a Marxist analytical framework, in the vein of British historian E.P. Thompson, in demonstrating the mill girls' agency in challenging and interacting with the circumstances within the mill that were beyond their control. Dublin supplemented his quantitative monograph in 1981 with the Qualitative Farm to Factory Women's Letters 1830 to 1860. Bernice Selden's The Mill Girls, Lucy Larcom, Harriet Hanson Robinson, and Sarah Bagley provides biographical sketches of these factory girls concerning their attitudes towards their Christian faith, labor activism, family, and participation in the Lowell Offering. Interest in the Lowell Mill Girls and the Lowell Offering has continued into the 21st century and grown beyond the scope of labor history. Feminist American studies historians such as Katja Kanzler have focused on the mill girls' experiences in her 2005 article, Texts, Commodities, and Genteel Factory Girls. The textile mill is a feminine space in antebellum American literature. As evidence for the collapsing of conceptually gendered spaces and languages, as factory girls thrived in the male sphere of the factory and transformed the language of Victorian gentility into one of labor activism. The utilization of the rich literary record left by the mill girls, factory payroll data, and the legacy of the mill girls as pioneers of American labor activism has produced insightful and informative historical scholarship. While the strike of 1836 is discussed in various historical monographs and articles, in-depth statistical analysis of the 1836 strike is often overshadowed by viewing the strike as one meaningful yet unsuccessful component in the mill girls' story. Often, historiographical focus remains on the formation of union activism in mills, the push for the 10-hour workday, and the Lowell offering. The 1836 Hamilton payroll offers much in terms of analytical depth but are not without shortcomings. For example, within the Hamilton payroll data, one can analyze our workers' native origin, sex, literacy, housing, participation in the 1836 strike, jobs, child or adult status, mobility within the mill, as well as monthly and daily wages. However, notably missing is marital status. This is a potentially important missing variable in both the 1836 and 1850 payroll data that could shed light on the behavior of male workers. That said, when coupled with primary qualitative data and secondary historical literature on the mills, the 1836 payrolls can provide substantive insights into what kinds of work mill workers did, their capabilities outside the mills, and most importantly, who went on strike. According to the 1836 Hamilton Mill payroll record, the Lowell mill workforce was 85.6% female. Lowell's mill girls were mostly weavers, 35% of women. However, there were also concentrations of female labor among spare hands, 21% of women, spinners, 15% of women, drawers, 6% of women, and a variety of other jobs. The Lowell mill girls held overwhelmingly Christian worldviews that prioritized critical thought and adherence to transcendent moral truth through hard work and study. However, they found the mill's long hours, unhealthy working conditions, wage cuts, and rent increases to be exploitative, degrading, and unchristian. This resulted in two strikes in 1834 and 1836. Contrary to what one may think, the most exploited workers at the Lowell mills were not the ones who tended to go on strike. Skilled female workers who had achieved a degree of stability in pay and length of time working at the mills were the highest concentration of strikers, according to the Hamilton payroll data. In addition to the native mill girls, the Lowell mills also had a minority of child and immigrant laborers who were among the lowest paid workers. None of the child workers listed on the 1836 Hamilton payroll were said to have gone on strike in 1836. This figure, however, may be due to missing data. Tension in the sources surfaces in two areas. When a frequency table is run for status, which measures children versus adult workers, 14 boys and 40 girls are listed for a total of 24 children. However, when a cross-tabulation is run contrasting status, to strike only 10 children are listed in total, all as non-strikers. Furthermore, in her autobiography, Loom and Spindle, Harriet Robinson claims that as an 11-year-old working in the lower rooms at the Hamilton Mill during the 1836 strike, she stated, "I don't care what you do, I'm going to turn out whether anyone else does or not," and proceeded to lead a walkout with a line of workers in tow. Harriet's bravado, by her own account, got her mother fired from her job as a boarding house matron, a move which Harriet attributed to revenge on the part of the mill owners. Of the 32 immigrant workers listed in the 1836 Hamilton factory payrolls, only one immigrant is listed as participating in the 1836 strike, a female English spinner who made 56 cents a day. Interestingly, the English workers, while a small minority, were, on average, the highest paid workers at the mills, $1.14 a day. It is worth noting that of the immigrant workers at the 1836 Hamilton Mill, the lowest paid were the Irish workers, 70% of whom were listed as low-paid spare hands, making on average only 40 cents a day. In addition, Irish workers' opportunities to bond with native workers was hindered by a combination of cultural difference and housing dynamics. Irish workers, Catholicism, speech, dress, and separate Catholic schools caused them to be viewed by native mill girls as a foreign curiosity unique to city life. Furthermore, in 1836, native workers lived overwhelmingly 9.6% in company boarding homes, while the small number of Irish workers remained scattered, staying with family members and living in various boarding homes. According to Thomas Dublin's 1975 article, Women, Work, and the Family, Female Operatives in the Lowell Mills, 1830 to 1860. Among the strikers of the 1834 and 36 strikes, 28% of strikers lived in company boarding homes, while only 12 of strikers stayed living at home. In essence, mill girls living in boarding homes were more than twice as likely to strike. In terms of gender, Of the 148 male workers at the Lowell mills, none are listed as having gone on strike. While 33% of men acted as overseers, the remaining concentrations of male labor, such as carders, 25% of men, spare hands, 8% of men, and repair, 16% of men, did not join their striking female co-workers. Male mill workers made, on average, 1.05 a day to mill girls' mean daily pay of 60 cents. Female workers, who went on strike, 34.6%, tended to be native-born, 99.9%, with a majority of strikers being weavers, 40.9%, who were among the highest skilled workers at the mills. Mill girls who received upper mid-level salaries, such as weavers, 65 cents a day, and those who worked at the mill for a period of 3 years or longer, were the most likely to strike, 59.3%. The development of an organized labor movement within the mills led to literary publications such as the Lowell Offering, 1840 to 45, which demonstrated the mill girls' ability to convey their humanity, creativity, spirituality, and desire for fair industrial labor via the written word. What made the Lowell Offering possible was the overwhelming literacy of the mill girls, 92.1% in 1836. This number increases to 99.6% when applied to those listed as native-born on the Hamilton payrolls. For the owners of the Lowell mills, the most dangerous ideology to harmony in the mills was their own professed Christianity in the hands of their workers. To reassure mill girls' parents that their daughters would not be entering urban iniquity, workers were housed in company boarding homes overseen by matrons, and boarders were required to attend a church. Articles in Lowell factory tracts, publications that offered more controversial critiques of the mills than the Lowell Offering, railed against how the totalizing effects of mill work contradicted the supposed Christian principles of mill life. One 1846 factory tract article went on to critique the hypocrisy of requiring mill girls to attend church while hiring construction day laborers on the Sabbath. This resulted in the noise of several dozen men splitting logs and blasting rocks, making it difficult for churchgoers to worship. The primacy of profit over spiritual and mental growth would lead to ignorance, misery, and premature decay of both body and intellect. The tract's author goes on to state, "In the strength of our united influence, we will soon show these driveling cotton lords, this mushroom aristocracy of New England, who so arrogantly aspire to lord it over God's heritage, that our rights cannot be trampled upon with impunity." 20th century Leninist presumptions about an industrial proletariat needing the guidance of a radical intellectual vanguard to help articulate working-class discontent in a meaningful, theoretical context were not applicable to the native-born mill girls. Within the pages of the Lowell Offering metacritiques of capitalist functionality appeared that predated and mirrored Marx's analysis of capitalism in his 1844 economic and philosophical manuscripts. For example, a mill girl, going by the pen name M.A., critiqued capitalism's dehumanization and short-sightedness in her 1843 Lowell Offering essay, Wealth and Poverty. She writes, "Virtue, honesty, happiness, all these and whatever else that is pure, lovely, that may happen to interfere with their management, all engrossing pursuit must be sacrificed at the shrine of Mammon. The poor repine that their lot has been cast in the barren vale of poverty, and the rich, perchance, look round upon their hoards of accumulated wealth with dissatisfaction, because there are others who, from some golden pinnacle, can look down upon them with all a miser's pity. There is wealth, to which this is in comparison, but as a drop in the bucket. That there are jewels far richer than ever sparkled on beauty's brow, or glittered in the monarch's diadem. It is the wealth of the mind, of the heart." M.A. goes on to discuss the transcendent power of the moral and intellectual over the external accumulation of wealth. These writings were not limited to the realm of abstract theorizing in the Lowell Offering. Rather, these ideas, reconciling the human agent with transcendent, all-encompassing moral truth, and provided an ideological basis for striking of the 1830s and the labor organizing of the 1840s as Lowell mill workers fought for better working conditions, stable pay, and ultimately the 10-hour workday. Toiling below higher-paid male workers and hovering above low-paid immigrant laborers, the striking Lowell mill girls of 1836 were able to use their economic, professional, and intellectual capital in an attempt to transform the Lowell mills into a working environment that respected human intellect, spirituality, and the desire for dignified productive labor. Though the 1836 strike was short-lived and workers' demands were not met, their actions and writings reflect not only their agency as female Christian workers, but also the organic articulation of a leveling working-class consciousness within the history of U.S. labor relations. As economic fluctuations that call capitalist primacy into question continue to occur, and the search for meaningful life in labor persists, the example of the mill girls of Lowell is a reminder of the American tradition of labor activism, as well as the richness of the historical and cultural consciousness of the American proletariat. Bibliography A.M. Wealth and Poverty. The Lowell Offering. Lowell, Mrs. Crutis and Farley, 1844. Dublin, Thomas. Women, Work, and the Family. Female Operatives in the Lowell Mills, 1830-1860. Feminist Studies, Volume 3, Number 1 Half, Autumn, 1975. Thomas Dublin. Women at Work. Columbia University Press, 1979, Phoner. Philip. The Factory Girls. University of Illinois, 1907, Kansley, Katya. Texts, Commodities, and Genteel Factory Girls. The Textile Mill as a Feminine Space in Antebellum America. America Studian. American Studies, Volume 50, Number 4, 2005. Robinson, Harriet, H. Loom, and Spindle. Press Pacifica, 1976. Selden Mill Girls. Lucy Larcom. Harriet Hanson Robinson, Sarah Bagley, 1980.